My family thinks I'm responsible for their bad luck. Now I'm trying to prove I'm not cursed. I'm a 27-year-old woman, and for as long as I can remember, I've been treated like some kind of walking omen in my family. It started as a joke when I was a kid. My uncle would laugh and say, "Whenever Emily shows up, something breaks." Back then, I thought it was just a silly thing adults said. But as I grew older, those jokes stopped sounding like jokes. They started sounding like accusations. I still remember my cousin's wedding when I was 16. On the day I arrived, the venue lost power for 2 hours. Guests sat in the dark, the bride was in tears, and I could hear whispers behind me. Of course this happened when Emily came. That night, my aunt cornered me in the bathroom and told me, straight-faced, that maybe I shouldn't attend important family events anymore, because my presence always triggered something bad. I laughed nervously, but inside, I felt like someone had carved a wound in me. Over the years, it got worse. My grandmother broke her hip the same week I moved back into town. My father lost his job the month I started working my first office role. My brother's car accident? He swears it happened because he had just picked me up from the train station. I can't control car crashes, I can't control layoffs, I can't control broken bones, yet somehow, in their minds, it all traced back to me. At first, I tried to ignore it. But there's something about being blamed constantly that wears down your mind. You start second-guessing everything. When my mom got pneumonia last year, the first thing she said when she saw me at the hospital was, "Maybe it's better if you don't come back tomorrow, Emily. I don't want anything else to happen." Do you realize how gutting that is? Your own mother, sick and weak, still treating you like a curse. I'm not cursed. I know that logically. But when everyone around you whispers it enough times, when they avoid your eyes, when they start excluding you from birthdays, reunions, and holidays, you begin to question yourself. You begin to wonder if maybe, just maybe, you are the problem. That's when I decided, if my family thought I was cursed, I was going to prove them wrong. Even if it meant tearing apart every piece of bad luck and showing them it had nothing to do with me. Because I'm tired of being their scapegoat. When I decided to prove my family wrong, I didn't even know where to start. It felt ridiculous. How do you prove you're not cursed? But I knew that if I just sat around letting their accusations pile up, I would drown in them. So I started by going back in my mind, tracing each of the so-called incidents they'd linked to me, and asking myself, what actually happened? The first memory that stuck out was my cousin's wedding, the one where the lights went out. At the time, I had cried in the bathroom, convinced everyone thought I ruined her day. But recently, I looked it up. Turns out the entire region had experienced a power outage that evening due to a storm knocking down a transformer. It wasn't me. It wasn't bad luck. It was weather. But when I tried telling my aunt that, she just shrugged and said, "Still funny how it always happens around you." Then there was my dad's job loss. He was laid off during a huge corporate downsizing that affected nearly 200 employees across the state. Yet, when he told people about it, he made sure to add, and guess who had just started her first job that same week? Emily, my little jinx. He laughed when he said it, but the way people looked at me, like I was carrying something poisonous, burned into my skin. I went deeper. My brother's accident? He was speeding, trying to impress his friends when his tire blew out. He wasn't even supposed to be driving that fast. But when he tells the story, he always says, "It was after I picked up Emily." Figures. Piece by piece, I was building this picture in my head. None of these things were supernatural, none of them were tied to me. They were coincidences, mistakes, circumstances out of anyone's control, but my family didn't want to hear logic. They wanted someone to carry their misfortunes, and I was the easiest target. The final straw came a few months ago, at my grandmother's birthday. She was turning 80, and against my better judgment, I decided to go. I showed up with a cake I had spent hours baking. Everyone stared at me when I walked in. I tried to ignore it. But halfway through dinner, my cousin's toddler tripped on the rug, hit his head on the table, and started crying. He was fine, just a bump. But the entire room went silent, and all eyes shifted to me. I felt the weight of 30 pairs of eyes pressing into my chest like knives. And then I heard my uncle whisper, "See? Every damn time." I left the house shaking, the cake untouched. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, and I made a vow. I wasn't just going to gather explanations for the past. I was going to confront this head on. If they thought I was cursed, I would make them look at the truth they refused to see. Because if I didn't, I was going to lose my mind. I'm a 27-year-old woman, and the night I left my grandmother's birthday party, shaking and humiliated, something inside me broke. I sat in my car in the driveway, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight they ached, while I listened to muffled voices drifting out the open windows of the house. I could hear them laughing, whispering, and then my name, always my name, like I was some ghost haunting their lives instead of their own flesh and blood. I cried so hard I couldn't even drive for 20 minutes. But when the tears dried, anger set in. And beneath the anger, something harder, sharper, determination. If they needed a scapegoat, they weren't going to get away with pinning that role on me forever. I wasn't cursed, I was just convenient. The very next morning, I started making a plan. I pulled out an old notebook and listed every major bad luck event they had blamed me for. The wedding blackout. My dad's layoff. My brother's accident. My mom's pneumonia. My grandmother's fall. The toddler's tumble. Even small things, like when my aunt lost her earring at Thanksgiving and joked, "Of course it happened when Emily sat at the table." I wrote them all down, one by one, and then next to each one, I wrote the actual reason. Regional power outage. Corporate downsizing. Reckless driving. Seasonal illness. Old age. A rug on the floor. No supernatural thread, no cursed aura, just life happening, messy and unpredictable. And yet, somehow, all roads pointed to me. But the problem wasn't the events, it was the belief. They needed to believe I was cursed, because believing it meant they didn't have to face their own mistakes, their own bad decisions. It was easier to say, "Emily brings misfortune," than to admit my brother was reckless, my father was careless, or my aunt was bitter. So I realized, proving I wasn't cursed wouldn't be about facts. It would be about forcing them to see what they didn't want to. I started small. I confronted my brother first. We were sitting in his garage while he worked on his car, the same one he'd crashed years ago. I asked him point blank, "Do you really think I caused your accident?" He snorted, wiping grease from his hands, and said, "I don't know, Em. All I know is, it happened right after I picked you up. Can't argue with patterns." Patterns? I snapped. "You were going 90 on a road with a 50 limit, blasting music, showing off. Your tire blew out because you never checked it. That's not a pattern, that's you being careless." He didn't answer. Just shrugged, like I was being hysterical. But I saw the flicker in his eyes, the way he couldn't quite meet my stare. Next, I called my dad. I told him I'd looked up articles from the year he lost his job, that I had proof hundreds of people were laid off. I expected him to feel guilty. Instead, he laughed and said, "Doesn't change the fact that your bad luck rubbed off on me, kiddo." I wanted to scream. Instead, I hung up. It became clear, facts weren't enough. If I was going to break this curse, I'd have to dig deeper. And that's when I started noticing something I hadn't before, how the whispers about me weren't just jokes anymore. They were stories. My aunt told a neighbor that I carried a strange energy. My cousin said his wife didn't want me near their baby because I was bad luck. And one night, scrolling through Facebook, I saw my grandmother had posted a status about the black sheep who always brought shadows wherever she went. She didn't use my name, but everyone in the family knew. That was when I realized this wasn't just humiliation. This was character assassination. A slow, poisonous drip meant to erase me from my own family. So I started digging. I asked questions, listened carefully, and the more I listened, the more I noticed something ugly hiding underneath all their talk about curses. It wasn't just superstition, it was a way to cover up secrets. Every time something bad happened, blaming me kept the focus off the real cause. My brother's reckless driving. My dad's gambling problem I'd overheard years ago. My cousin's shady business deal that ended in bankruptcy. The curse was a shield. And I was the shield they sacrificed again and again. I decided to stop being their shield. That was the moment everything changed. Because once you decide to pull at the threads of a family's lies, you don't know what you're going to unravel. After that night in the garage with my brother, I knew I couldn't just keep arguing facts. They didn't want facts. They wanted someone to dump all their guilt and shame on, and I was the easiest target. If I wanted to break this so-called curse, I had to do something bigger, something that would force them to confront the truth they'd buried under superstition. I started paying closer attention to the moments when I got blamed. Every time, it felt less like coincidence and more like deflection. Take my dad, for example. For years, he told everyone I was the reason he lost his job, but when I quietly dug through old paperwork in my mom's attic, I found letters from the company's HR department. He hadn't just been laid off, he'd been disciplined several times for inappropriate use of funds. Gambling. I remembered overhearing arguments between my parents late at night when I was younger, words like poker and debt slipping through the thin walls. It hit me like a punch in the stomach. If the truth ever came out, my dad would rather let me carry the shame of being cursed than admit his own failures. My brother? The car accident wasn't his only bad luck. He once nearly flunked out of college because he never went to class, but to this day he tells people he caught a streak of bad fortune because he had to drive me home on weekends. He failed, I became the story. Even my aunt, who had always been the loudest about me being jinxed, had her own skeletons. Everyone remembered how her husband left her suddenly and took most of their savings. For years, she hinted that maybe their marriage started falling apart because I used to babysit their kids and he started acting strange after that. She never outright accused me of anything, but the implication was there. Things went wrong when Emily was around. It was disgusting, but I couldn't ignore it anymore. I realized the curse wasn't just a story. It was a weapon. And it was being used to bury every single one of their mistakes. So I made a decision. If they wanted to treat me like the source of all their misfortunes, then I was going to drag the real reasons into the light. I was going to peel back every layer of lie they had built around me and show them exactly who they were hiding behind their whispers. The first confrontation happened at Sunday dinner a few weeks later. My aunt made a snide comment when her oven stopped working, muttering, "Of course this happens when Emily is here." Everyone laughed nervously. I didn't. I slammed my hand on the table and said, "You want to know why things keep going wrong? It's not me. It's you. All of you." The room froze. My dad's fork clattered against his plate. My grandmother looked at me like I'd just cursed at the Pope. My brother leaned back with a smirk, like he was waiting for me to implode. I kept going. "Dad, you didn't lose your job because of me, you lost it because you couldn't stop gambling. I've seen the letters. You'd rather paint me as cursed than admit you were drowning us in debt." His face went white. Then I turned to my brother. "You didn't crash your car because I was in it. You crashed it because you were showing off like an idiot. And you almost killed yourself. That's not my curse, that's your stupidity." The air grew heavier. My aunt hissed, "Watch your mouth." But I was done being quiet. "And your husband left because he couldn't stand your paranoia and control. Stop pretending I had anything to do with it." No one spoke. The silence was deafening, broken only by my grandmother whispering, "Enough." But for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one shrinking in shame. They were. Of course, it didn't end there. That dinner was only the beginning. Because when you rip away people's illusions, they don't thank you, they fight back harder. And soon, I realized I hadn't just poked at the idea of a curse. I had shattered something my family relied on, and they weren't about to forgive me for it. After that Sunday dinner, everything shifted. I thought that exposing their lies, finally speaking the truth aloud, would break something open, that maybe for once they'd stop and actually think about the weight they'd dumped on me all these years. Instead, it felt like I had declared war. The very next day, my aunt called my mom in tears, claiming I had attacked her in front of the family. She twisted every word I'd said into cruelty, painting me as ungrateful, disrespectful, and possessed with anger. My mom called me after, her voice tight and cold. "Emily, what's wrong with you? Do you want to destroy what's left of this family?" I laughed bitterly. Destroy? Mom, I've been their scapegoat my entire life. I just told the truth. But she didn't want to hear it. None of them did. The whispers only grew louder after that. Suddenly, family group chats went silent whenever I messaged. Cousins who used to invite me to birthdays or barbecues stopped including me. My grandmother unfriended me on Facebook. The few relatives who didn't actively believe in the curse stayed quiet, they didn't want to be dragged into it. And then came the cruelest part, they started using the children. One evening, I ran into my cousin Sarah at the grocery store with her 2 little boys. I bent down to say hello, and she physically pulled them back, clutching their shoulders. "Not today, Emily," she muttered, her eyes darting away. The look of fear in her son's eyes gutted me. They didn't even understand why they weren't allowed to hug their cousin, just that I was someone to avoid. I went home and sobbed until my chest hurt. But even in that pain, I noticed something. The harder I pushed, the harder they resisted, which meant I was getting close to something they desperately didn't want revealed. So I started digging deeper. I remembered my dad's HR letters, so I decided to quietly visit an old friend of his who used to work at the same company. We met for coffee, and when I asked if he remembered the layoffs, he nodded and sighed. "Yeah, but your dad wasn't just laid off, Emily. He was caught skimming from a company account. They didn't press charges because he begged them not to. He would have gone to jail otherwise." My blood went cold. That was it. The curse story wasn't just a shield for his gambling, it was covering up a near-criminal scandal. If anyone ever dug into it, his reputation in our small town would be destroyed. Then, my brother. I checked into public records about his car accident, and what I found made me sick. He hadn't just been speeding, he'd been drinking. The police report clearly noted alcohol on his breath, but somehow, the charge was dropped. When I confronted him about it, he exploded. "Why are you digging into this? What do you want, to ruin me?" "No," I shot back. "I want you to stop ruining me." And finally, my aunt. I asked around quietly about her husband leaving. I spoke to a neighbor of hers, an older woman who had seen it all. She leaned in and whispered, "He didn't leave because of money. He left because she cheated on him." Everyone in the neighborhood knew. Piece by piece, the puzzle came together. The curse wasn't just superstition. It was a deliberate tool. A scapegoat they could feed me into whenever their own failures, sins, and secrets threatened to crawl out. But here's the thing about secrets: once you find one, you realize it's just the tip of the iceberg. And the deeper I went, the more I started noticing contradictions, missing pieces, and things no one would ever say around me. Until one night, while flipping through some old family photo albums my mom had left in her attic, I found something that made my hands tremble. A hospital bracelet. Not mine. Not my brother's. The name on it was my mother's, but the date didn't match either of our births. It was from a year before I was even born. I froze. My mind spun with possibilities, and suddenly, a thought slammed into me with terrifying force. Maybe the curse wasn't just a shield for their mistakes. Maybe the entire story of who I was in this family had been built on a lie. And that was the first time I wondered if the real curse wasn't bad luck at all, but the secret of my own existence. I couldn't stop staring at that hospital bracelet. The date etched on it was burned into my mind, November 12, 1994. My brother was born in 1990. I was born in 1996. So who was this from? Why was it hidden inside an old photo album, tucked between pages of family Christmas pictures as if someone wanted it buried but not thrown away? That night, I confronted my mom. I held up the bracelet at the kitchen table, my voice shaking. "What is this? Whose is this?" Her face drained of color. She snatched it from my hand like it was evidence of a crime. "Where did you find this?" "In the attic." "Mom, what does this mean?" She didn't answer me. She just stood there, clutching it, her jaw tight, before finally whispering, "Some things are better left alone, Emily." Then she stormed off to her room, leaving me in the silence. But I couldn't leave it alone. Not anymore. The next day, I went digging. I requested my own birth records from the county clerk. It took a week, but when I opened the envelope, my stomach dropped. On my official record, under mother, was my mom's name. But under father, it was blank. I had always believed my dad was my biological father. He raised me, he called me his daughter. But there it was, empty space. When I confronted him, he lost it. He shouted, "Why are you dragging this up now? Haven't you caused enough trouble?" His hand shook as he pointed at me. "You were never supposed to know. That's why the curse stuck to you. That's why everything follows you. You don't belong in this family the way your brother does." It felt like someone had ripped the floor out from under me. "You mean I'm not your daughter?" My voice cracked. He didn't say yes. He didn't say no. He just looked away. And in that silence, I had my answer. I left the house, shaking, crying, my mind spinning. The curse, it wasn't about bad luck. It was about me. I was a walking reminder of something they wanted buried. An affair? A one-night stand? A man my mom had loved before she married my dad? Whoever he was, his existence was the family's real shame, and I was the proof. That's why every failure, every mistake, every tragedy had been piled on me. If they painted me as cursed, if they made me the lightning rod, then no one would ever ask the real question, where did Emily come from? I started piecing it together. My aunt's bitterness, my grandmother's coldness, my dad's constant hostility. It wasn't just about superstition. It was about blood. To them, I was the outsider. The illegitimate one. But I wasn't going to let them erase me. If they wouldn't give me answers, I was going to find them myself. I ordered a DNA test. It was the only way. Waiting for the results nearly killed me, but when they came back, everything clicked into place. My brother and I only shared about 25% of our DNA. We weren't full siblings. We were half siblings. Which meant my dad wasn't my biological father. I remember sitting on the floor with that email pulled up on my laptop, shaking so badly I thought I'd drop it. Everything suddenly made sense, the whispers, the way my dad always looked at me like I wasn't his, the way my grandmother said I was bad luck the day I was born. The curse wasn't random. The curse was my birth. I thought I'd feel broken, but what I felt instead was rage. Pure, white-hot rage. They had blamed me for every misfortune in their lives, when in reality, they were just too cowardly to admit the truth, that I was the product of my mother's secret, and they hated me for existing. And in that moment, I swore to myself, I was going to find out who my real father was. And when I did, I was going to make sure every single person in my family knew the truth they'd spent decades hiding. The curse wasn't on me anymore. It was on them. The DNA results lit a fire inside me that I couldn't put out. For the first time in my life, I wasn't going to accept the silence, the half-answers, or the curse story they had tied to my name. I was done being the scapegoat. I uploaded my DNA data to one of those ancestry sites. A week later, I got a match, close family. A man named Richard. According to the site, he was likely my uncle. I stared at his profile, my heart racing. I didn't know this man, but he shared enough DNA with me to mean something big. I sent him a message. At first, he didn't reply, but after a few days, he wrote back, "Emily, I think I know why you're contacting me. Call me." When we spoke on the phone, his voice was cautious. He asked me questions about where I grew up, my mom's maiden name, the hospital where I was born. Then he went quiet. Finally, he said, "Emily, I think you're my brother's daughter." My throat closed. "Your brother?" "Yes. His name was David. He and your mom, they had something. Everyone in the family knew about it. But she married your father instead, and when you were born, well, it was easier to pretend you were his child. I sat there in shock. My real father had a name. David. He wasn't some faceless stranger. He was a man my mom had loved. And he had a family who knew I existed, even if no one had ever told me. But then Richard's voice cracked. Emily. David died in a car accident before you were even a year old. He never got the chance to raise you. I felt like someone had stabbed me. All those years of wondering, all the pain of not knowing, and the man who should have been my father had been gone my whole life. And that's when everything snapped into place. The curse wasn't just a convenient story, it was a smokescreen. My dad resented me because I wasn't his. My grandmother despised me because I was living proof of her daughter-in-law's betrayal. My aunt piled on because it was easier to paint me as cursed than to admit the family had built itself on lies. I had been carrying the weight of their shame for decades. The next family gathering, I showed up with printed copies of the DNA results. I laid them on the table in front of everyone. Here, I said, my voice shaking but loud. Here's your curse. I'm not cursed. I'm just not his. And you all knew. The room went dead silent. My dad's face turned red, veins popping at his temples. My mom's eyes filled with tears. My grandmother muttered a prayer under her breath. My brother stared at the table like it might explode. I continued, my chest heaving. You blamed me my entire life for everything that went wrong. You said I was cursed. But the only curse here is your cowardice. You let me take the fall for your lies. No one spoke. No one even tried to deny it. That silence told me everything. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one shrinking in shame. They were. And yet, as I left that night, my chest heavy but my head held high, I realized something terrifying. Exposing the truth didn't free me from them. If anything, it made me more dangerous in their eyes. I wasn't just the scapegoat anymore, I was the threat who could destroy the fragile version of reality they had spent decades protecting. And I could feel it in their stares as I walked out. This wasn't over. After that night, nothing in my family was the same. For a few days, there was complete silence, no calls, no texts, no fake smiles pretending everything was fine. It was like I had detonated a bomb in the middle of our lives, and everyone was waiting to see where the debris would fall. Then it started. My grandmother called my mom and screamed so loudly I could hear her through the phone. She said I was the devil's child and that by dragging out the truth, I had doomed the family. My dad stopped coming home for days at a time, probably hiding from the humiliation. My mom, she wouldn't look at me. It was as if, by forcing her secret into the light, I had stolen the last bit of control she had. But the worst came from my brother. He showed up at my door one night, drunk, his eyes bloodshot. He shoved me hard against the wall. Do you realize what you've done? You ruined everything. People are talking. Do you know what they're calling me at work now? The brother of the cursed bastard. His words cut deeper than any slap. I had loved him my whole life, tried to be the sister he could lean on, even when he ignored me, and now, in his eyes, I wasn't even his sister anymore. I was a mistake that had destroyed his life. I shoved him back, my hands trembling but my voice steady. I didn't ruin anything. I just stopped taking the blame for all of you. You all chose lies over me. You made me carry a curse that wasn't real. I'm done. He stood there breathing heavily, his fists clenched, but then he turned and stormed out. That was the last time I saw him. Word spread fast in our town. People whispered. Some avoided me in public, crossing the street as if my curse was contagious. Others looked at me with pity, like I was some tragic accident of fate. But for the first time, I didn't care. Their judgment couldn't weigh more than the years of hate my own family had already thrown at me. I decided to meet Richard, my uncle, in person. When we sat together in a small cafe, he looked at me with a softness I had never seen from anyone in my bloodline. You look just like him, he said quietly. Like David. For a moment, I felt something I'd never felt before, belonging. Not with the family that raised me, but with the one that had been erased from my story. But then Richard said something that chilled me to the bone. Emily, be careful. Families don't forgive easily when their lies are exposed. You've broken the illusion they lived in for decades. That makes you dangerous to them. And he was right. The calls from my mom grew colder, more calculated. My dad pretended I didn't exist. My grandmother sent me a letter saying she had removed me from her prayers and that she wished I had never been born. My brother blocked me entirely. I wasn't cursed. I was hated. Hated because I refused to carry the shame of their choices anymore, and yet, I can't lie, I feel it every day. This heaviness. This shadow. When my car breaks down, when I lose a job opportunity, when I wake up in the middle of the night panicking, a small voice whispers, maybe they were right. Maybe I am cursed. But deep down, I know the truth. The curse was never mine. It was theirs. It was born the day they decided silence was safer than love, the day they buried my real father's memory under layers of lies. I built my own life now, away from them. But some nights, when everything feels too quiet, I wonder if I'll ever be free of it. Because even knowing the truth, even breaking the chain, the question still haunts me in the dark. What if they were right all along? I don't know what to believe anymore.
Follow me for more stories.